Hello and welcome back to episode 15 of the Talking Aussie Hoops podcast. Firstly, before we get started with anything, just want to say a massive thank you for 100 followers on Instagram. Views and everything on Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, they're all going really well. So much appreciated. Thank you everyone for tuning in. For this episode here, we're going to be doing an NBA season predictions. We've got a very special guest, Patrick from the Foul Trouble podcast. It's a very good podcast. I highly recommend you guys check it out. Before we kind of get into that, I'll just give you a bit of a layout of how the channel is going to run from here on out in the future. So I guess the plan of what we'll be doing will be, probably from the start of the NBA season, we'll be trying to get out one NBA episode per week and one NBL episode per week. So just chatting on, the recent topics, teams that are playing well, teams that aren't playing well, and just chatting about everything that's going on there. We'll be looking to implement that over the next few weeks. Apologies, it's a very tough period now with exams and everything for uni, but we're getting there, Uploads will be a bit more frequent coming on in the future. And we'll continue to grow the channel and grow the podcast and go from there. Perfect. Enjoy the episode. Cheers. Perfect. Now we are welcoming from a big podcast that I've been a massive fan of the last couple of months. We've got Patrick from Foul Trouble. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me on, Sam. I'm ready to chop it up, really get ready for the big NBA season we got upcoming.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've finally gotten through. I mean, it was a bit of a better off season because we actually had the Olympics on. But I mean, the world's not the same without NBA basketball. It's just not as enjoyable. We're finally back. Preseason action's been going on, and very excited. Before I jump into some predictions, this morning for me, ESPN just released the top 100 players. I don't know if you've had a look at that yet.
I've seen a little discourse of it on Twitter and whatnot, but I have not really gotten to comb over it super well. I can pull it up real quick though.
Yeah, I took a few notes quickly just beforehand, but they've released from 100 to 51, and they've just got some interesting takes so far. So the one that got me quite a bit, Derek Lively, 56, the 56th ranked player in the league, Derek Lively.
Yeah, it seems I agree that seems like a little high, but also the stuff that we saw Derek Lively doing in the playoffs and just his ability as a non-shooting rim running center to stay on the court was really a super rare thing, especially for a rookie. So I feel that's a little bit of forecasting.
There's just some interesting ones because we also had KCP and Josh Hart went 62 and 61. And I mean, look, I'm all for those kinds of players because you need those kinds of players because to win championships, obviously Denver 2 seasons ago, you need a KCP. The Lakers, for example, you need a KCP. You need those extra guys. But him and Josh Hart, both 62 and 61, and over players like Naz Reid, Zach LaVine, it's interesting.
Yeah, especially Cade Cunningham at 67, under 2 guys that are just clearly role players that have much simpler responsibilities than a guy like Cade Cunningham. That seems way too low for him. Honestly, Darius Garland is a little high after his kind of meltdown in the playoffs last year at 57.
It's unreal. The one that got me is awesome. My brother's a Denver fan. Michael Porter Jr., 89. You wouldn't say being at least he follows Denver all the time. And me being a Laker fan, I've seen plenty of Denver lately, which has been unfortunate. But looking at the team, Michael Porter Jr., 89, and KCP, 62. It's it just doesn't feel that,
Yeah, no, totally. Especially what Michael Porter Jr. was able to contribute to that team in the playoffs last year. You got to think if he were a little bit more of a versatile scorer, they would have been able to overcome the
Yeah.
Timberwolves in the playoffs. And yeah, I mean, that's a little rich for my blood for KCP. Like, we all love a quintessential 3-and-D player, but it's not like he's
Yeah.
shooting 45% from three, right?
No, absolutely. All right. Well, that's from 100 to 51. So I'm very curious to see how they go from there. I'm sure it'll be released tomorrow or something like that. But look, we'll get into our predictions for this upcoming season. So Patrick, I'm curious, who is your MVP for this upcoming season?
My MVP, I got Luka Doncic.
Yep.
Obviously, I'm a Suns fan. I am not like a Luka Doncic lover. But I mean, something that's super important to remember, I think, with all end of season awards is like the narrative that you can build around these players is kind of the most important thing. Like, going into last season, I was obviously Luka is one of the top 5 players in the league. But going into last season, I was pretty staunch in the fact that there's just like no way Luka Doncic could win MVP last year, because one, he didn't make the playoffs, and like just looking historically, if you don't make the playoffs the year before, the chances I think the last person that won MVP the next year was like Kareem in like 1967. So like, just the precedent is not there. But coming into this season, you've got Luka coming off obviously a trip to the finals, and where he just looked incredible. Like, we knew it was coming. It was kind of like eventually we were gonna get there, but to be as dominant that he was, as he was, I think it makes sense. And like, in the second half of the year last year, I mean, Luka was shooting 39% from three, which that's always been kind of his weak spot, of just a little bit of a streaky 3-point shooter. And that's partially because he shoots very, very difficult 3-pointers. And his plus minus, once they were able to get in Daniel Gafford and PJ Washington, jumped from plus 2.8 pre-All-Star to plus 8.2, which is just like absolutely ridiculous.
No, absolutely.
The other thing that I looked at is just like, Luka, he got selected to his 5th first team All-NBA last year. When you look at guys who have made at least 5 first team All-NBAs, there's only 3 guys with more than him that never won an MVP. And we're talking Jerry West, we're talking Elgin Baylor, and we're talking Dolph Schayes. These are all guys that played when the players were still the only ones voting on the MVP. And like, it's just like not replicable. It's like the other guys that have 5 are like Dwight Howard, Jason Kidd, Rick Barry, George Gervin, like either way too far away, or guys that lost part of their primes to playing in the ABA, and then guys that were just kind of like role players or in like a weird time in the NBA. So I think it feels like 33 points a game, 10 assists, almost 10 rebounds. You got to think one of these years he's going to have average a triple double. And I am just like kind of bullish on the Mavericks this year.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the thing I love about Dallas is that obviously after that trade deadline, you mentioned before, adding Daniel Gafford, adding PJ Washington, like the one thing that I feel like has been the criticism of Dallas has been their defense. But they had I can't remember exactly where they were, but they were somewhere top 7, top 8 defense post All-Star break. And like the one thing with Dallas that's kind of, hindered Luka's chances, the fact that Dallas haven't been like that top Western seed yet. But if you get, a top 3 seed for Dallas and then Luka's averaging, 33, 34 point near triple double, I mean, it's going to be very, very hard not to give him the award.
Absolutely.
Especially as you said. Yeah, especially as you said, he's been on that rise for ages, 5 or so first team All-NBAs. It's just unreal. But yeah, no, I mean, Luka, that's a very, very good bet. I would not be surprised whatsoever.
I wish I could have given you a hot take there, but it just feels right. And you look at the other guys, it's like, Shea could be right there. We haven't released our pod talking about this yet on Foul Trouble, but James brought up a great point that like Shea is going to be right there in the mix, right? The Thunder, everyone's talking about how like they're just an easy pick to be the number 1 seed in the West. But if the Mavs are comparable record wise or seeding wise, like Luka is always going to have the edge there against Shea unless he averages like 40 points a game, because he's not going to be there with rebounds. Maybe he might be around there with assists, but it's also just like they're relying on Luka so much more. And then guys like Embiid, probably not going to qualify. Jokic, it's going to be a tough journey for him this year. I think have you caught any Nuggets preseason ball?
Yeah, see, my brother being a Denver fan, like, I mean, hasn't been great.
The only reason I have really watched any is because they were playing the Suns last week, but they were playing all of their starters, and the Suns were sitting like their top 6 guys. Yeah, and they ended up losing the game, and they were playing them deep into the third quarter. The bench is just, there's no creation. That so much is going to be on Jokic's like plate. That I mean, I guess if he gets them up there, he'll have a great narrative to push him there. But also, people don't really want to give you, 5 MVPs, 4 MVPs in 5 years.
Look, it'll be interesting for Jokic. But yeah, I mean, as you said, photo fatigue's real. It's gonna be very hard for him to be up there. It kind of feels like it's Luka's year. Like, it just does. My MVP. I've got a guy who I mean, in regards to his perception in the league, I feel like it's just gone down. But it's Giannis. Like, this is a guy who still, I mean, every season's averaging, 30, 32 points. He's up there, 11, 12 rebounds. His assists even are high at the moment, 6, 7 assists per game. He gives all NBA defense every night. I guess kind of the thing about him is that he's just been injured come postseason time lately. And he just hasn't been able to really showcase himself in the playoffs. And like, obviously the playoffs mean everything in regards to like best player in the world scenarios and cases and everything. And just the fact that he hasn't been there lately has just been a bit rough. But I mean, with Boston, I feel like Boston's obviously tough to beat in regards to the regular season. But, having Porzingis out for the first couple of months of the season with his injury, I'm just thinking, all right, another year of Giannis and Dame. They've had a full preseason yet again to build that chemistry. If Giannis can start out the season and Milwaukee can kind of rival Boston for that 1 seed in the East, I reckon Giannis potentially is a bit of a comeback. It's not really a comeback, but just another opportunity to hopefully be up there. I reckon Giannis could, if he can kind of contend with Boston, could definitely be an MVP candidate this season.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, like with the Bucks and even the Suns, a lot of these teams that made these huge superstar moves in the last couple of years, like it takes a little time for these things to simmer. And you even look at the Timberwolves last year as like kind of the 1A example of this is when their like change was more on the defensive side, putting Rudy Gobert next to another center like Karl Anthony Towns. It took a little bit of time to meld. And when you think of the Bucks in that lens, like they had the year from hell last year. Dame never really felt super settled. Giannis actually statistically had like one of his best seasons. And then Chris Middleton was in and out, but you change out your head coach mid-season. None of that's going to happen this year. Maybe they might have some injury problems. I mean, I know Doc isn't like the most reliable coach, but I'd say his track record in the regular season is usually pretty solid. But Giannis was my pick last year to be MVP, and I definitely don't hate that. I think people are too low on Giannis. I mean, this is a guy that we saw win a championship already. He has multiple MVPs. There's no reason, and he's squarely in his prime. There's no reason he can't do it this year.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, there's MVP for this season. Who's your defensive player of the year coming up for this season?
Defensive player of the year, I've got Victor Wembanyama. This is another, he's the betting favorite. The tough thing about Wemby getting this award, I think, is just his team's overall record.
Yeah.
I do not forecast the Spurs to be very good this year. Love Chris Paul. Like, obviously, he's an amazing player, one of the greatest all time. But Chris Paul is a guy who was playing like 25 minutes last year against backups, was still getting injured, missed large swaths of time. And I just don't, now that you reinsert him against starting level players, I just don't see him being able to survive a long season. And I think the scenario where the Spurs are like competing for the play-in tournament, that's a scenario where Chris Paul is playing a really, really big role, like reminiscent of how he was on the Suns a couple years ago. And like, even in his last year with the Suns, he couldn't keep up with that pace to be relied on. With all that being said, where we started with this conversation is these are narrative builders. These are narrative, like this is all the media pushing out who, like there's a couple players that could win each of these awards, and then the media kind of chooses which one it's his turn. And Victor Wembanyama is absolutely incredible. I think he is by far the most versatile defender in the league right now. We saw that the start of last season, he was defending fours and doing that fine. I think there's not a single player in the NBA who like is comfortable being defended by Victor Wembanyama. And I think this year he's going to be playing 5 full time. His plus minus is going to be absurd because they're just bringing up garbage behind him. And I mean, I just think this is going to be the start of the Victor Wembanyama Defensive Player of the Year run.
Yeah, and it's scary to say, like, because it's in his second year, and he'll be in this conversation for the next 10, 12, 13 years. Oh, it's unreal.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I just find it crazy that Wembanyama, I'm pretty sure, is my age or maybe a year older than me, and I'm here at home in Australia. He's in the NBA, and he's just 7'4" or something. Oh, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's insane. Yeah, I was thinking to myself, like, who do you think would win in a 7-game series? Team France or the Spurs? Because I don't know.
Genuinely, that's it. Because I mean, if what was the guy's name who signed with Philadelphia?
Yabusele, yeah.
He was a freak in that France team.
And he's going to be struggling to get minutes on the 76ers. But I think if you match up that France team against any other team in the NBA, they'd probably get swept in a 7-game series, or with a few exceptions. But it's just a testament to how this Spurs team is not good yet.
Yeah, and I mean, look, with Wemby, they'll get there eventually. But yeah, my DPOY, I've got Bam Adebayo. I just feel like I was kind of tossing up between him and AD, but like I don't trust the Lakers team defense. I just don't trust that. And I guess it's the thing with Wemby, I guess we didn't touch on. Even if the team defense for the Spurs isn't good, Wemby's like steals and blocks are going to be through the roof. Like, so it kind of like overrides if his team's not that good on defense, if he's just so individually that dominant. But it's kind of the opposite here with Miami. I guess Miami have always been up there, a very good defensive system. I mean, Eric Spoelstra loves using the zone. And yeah, I just think as a big, you don't get much better than Bam. One of the top defenders in the world. And yeah, just the fact that he hasn't won a Defensive Player of the Year yet, I think is just crazy. So look, it's one of those ones where I feel like, hopefully we'll see what happens, but hopefully, he and AD can get a bit more recognition on the defensive end. But yeah, no, I reckon Bam for this year.
I love that pick. Yeah, I picked Bam last year. I mean, he's like one of the most versatile, fun defenders that we've really ever seen, and it's a shame that he hasn't won one yet.
Yeah. Oh well, we'll see how it goes, and it's going to be tough with Wemby coming up the next decade. Really, it's going to be tough for anyone to win it. Wemby's
Yeah.
going to go crazy. I've just unreal. But yeah, so there's MVP. There's Defensive Player of the Year. Do you have a Rookie of the Year pick?
Yeah, dude, this one's tough, right?
Mm,
So kind of where I started with this is like obviously this is one of the least heralded rookie classes in
mm,
recent memory. It definitely in my lifetime. So I wanted to look at like games started, like who in all of the Rookie of the Year winners had started the least amount of games. And that was not to anyone's surprise, but that was Malcolm Brogdon in
yeah.
2016, 2017. And he started 28 games. After that, it's LaMelo Ball started 31 games. That was another really weird, weak class, like coming out of 2020. Then Vince Carter with 49, Patrick Ewing with 50. But I'm looking at this list of players and I'm like, who is even going to sniff like 50 games started?
Yeah,
Because
genuinely.
like it's not going to be very many of them. And whoever it is, it's going to be, I think, pretty surprising who it ends up being. I think that the candidates that make sense to me right now is like a Zachary Richesay. I mean, he was the number one pick in the draft, but even his starting equity is a little scary for me because the Hawks have no reason to lose this year. And I think Richesay will be okay, but Quinn Snyder is a coach that often leans older. And is he starting him over a DeAndre Hunter? Jalen Johnson had his breakout year last year. Is he going to be able to start next to him? They're kind of similar players, or over him. Like Reed Shepherd, my favorite guy in my draft this year. He's not going to start it at all. I think bearing like a Fred VanVleet injury. Ron Holland, Stephen Castle, Alex Sarr, I just haven't seen much from yet. So with all that said, I ended up with, again, the betting favorite. Vegas is pretty good at this stuff, but Zach Edey. Hey, the NBA is moving back to big guys, and it doesn't get much bigger than Zach Edey. And from just his preseason tape, and I think we saw it a little bit at Purdue, but he's a lot more mobile than I think a lot of people are giving him credit for. And I think if he can just, eat up a easy 10 boards a night, get like 15 points ish, somewhere around there, and then, get a block, average a block, maybe a block and a half, which I think that's all within the range of possibilities. It's right there for him to lose, basically. And the infrastructure defensively, I don't think it gets any more friendly for a young center than having Jaren Jackson Jr. Like lurking weak side, ready to clean up any mess. So that's why I ended up going with Zach Edey.
Yeah, and that's fair. And I guess with that Memphis team as well, you've got obviously Triple J out there with him. Obviously, in the backcourt as well, you've got Marcus Smart there, who'll be, obviously, if you get past Marcus Smart, it's like, I mean, fair play. He's a freak defender, and then you run into those two bigs. That's going to be a nightmare for teams.
It's terrifying.
It's going to be unreal.
It's terrifying. Yeah. No, that actually makes me think of when the Suns drafted DeAndre Ayton. Part of like what made his rookie season not as painful as I think as it could have been was having guys like Mikal Bridges, guys like DeAnthony Melton, who the Suns had at the time, being point of attack defenders to just like alleviate that pressure, give them a chance to, like, if you're playing in the drop coverage, having really like insulating defenders on the outside just gives you an extra second to like think about what's going on. Have you lost the guy behind you? Like, what's going on? Who do you got?
I don't know. It's been, as you mentioned, it's a weird rookie class. Like it just feels like a lot of role players in this class. Look, I've gone with the guy who I think will be the best player within the next 5 years, and that's Reed Shepherd.
There we go.
Yeah, you said before, probably not the guy who's going to be starting a lot of games, but I just feel like him off the bench, he's such a good shooter. Once he starts getting some real minutes, he's going to be a freak. And like I watched him in summer league, watched a bit of him preseason, that kind of thing. It looks good. It looks good. And a lot
It
of the
looks
scrimmages,
great. Yeah.
yeah, a lot of the scrimmages and stuff they've released from their training sessions, he looks like he fits right in. So yeah, no, I think he's going to be really good. And I think, if he comes out, he has a consistent, you mentioned like 15 points for Zach Edey. If he can be something anywhere close to that coming off the bench, and he'll probably end up, if we think he's as good as what he will end up being, probably closing games and things of that nature. So, I mean, hopefully it'd be cool to see Reed Shepherd win. But I mean, besides that, it's just tough because Rizichet, as you mentioned, he's a guy who's going to be, will he be backup wing? And, wings, I guess, are kind of hard to win unless you're kind of the main predominant ball handler. Alex
Especially,
Sarr is going to be interesting.
yeah, I was just gonna say playing with Trae Young and
Yeah.
going from like playing professionally in Europe, where just the play style is not that of like a complete heliocentric star of Trae Young. Like, there's gonna be a lot of adjusting right there.
Yeah, no, it's gonna be interesting. But yep, so I got Reed Shepherd, so we'll see how we go with that one. But obviously, Patrick, we've spoken about all the players individually and all your individual awards. Your championship prediction, who do you have?
My champion, it's a little boring as well, but I just feel like the Celtics, they were so dominant in a way that nobody wants to give them their flowers for last year. And like, I'm no Celtics fan. I would much rather, if I'm betting on Celtics versus the field to win the championship, I'm going to vote, or I would bet on the field. Just because I think there is so much parity currently in the NBA. But like, let's look at this Boston team. I mean, they had a plus 11.6 net rating last year. They have the best offensive rating of all time. They have the third best defensive rating. It's just like all time stuff right there. And then you only lose 3 games on your march to the championship. And I realize it's not like a murderer's row of teams that you had to go up against. But I mean, the Dallas Mavericks beat some really freaking good teams on their way there. And it looked like they didn't even deserve to be on the same court as the Celtics.
Yeah, no, I've got Boston as well. It's crazy. It's just on paper, their top 6, can score the ball. They can all defend. Like, if your 5th or 6th best player is Derek White, like, that's crazy. You've got obviously Jason Tatum, who's an absolute superstar. But then you got Jaylen Brown, you've got Porzingis, Drew Holiday. Like, the amount of players just on this team on paper. Like, I've been playing with my brother in 2K, and he goes as Boston, and I just can't beat them.
No, they're impossible to beat on 2K.
I had to go as the 2016-17 Warriors with KD, and then I only just won by a few points. Like, it's unreal.
Yeah, no, it totally is. And you're listing these players off, and like, let's give them the caveats that they deserve. Porzingis barely played in the playoffs. They still only had 3 losses. Jason Tatum was like, could not hit a 3 to save his life. They still won handedly. And this was the first year that they had. We were talking earlier about teams that bring in superstars and how it takes a while to adjust. Last year was their first year with Drew Holiday and Kristaps Porzingis. Like, this team should get better.
Yeah.
Especially like scary. Guys like Sam Hauser, guys like Peyton Pritchard. Like, these guys are good players. Sam Hauser would be like the 6th best player on the Suns.
Yeah. Be the 6th best player pretty much everywhere.
Yeah. And he like is the 9th best player on the Celtics.
Oh, it's unreal. It is so scary for the rest of the league. I don't know. I feel like to win an NBA championship, like, obviously besides looking at offense and defense and everything, you need superstars and you need like a certain amount of players that can actually play playoff minutes. Yeah. Like, you really need 7 or 8 like real guys that you can go to. But when you're talking about superstars, obviously they've got their 2 main superstars in Tatum and Brown. But I mean, on any given night, Drew Holiday is pretty much can be he's a defensive menace. If he goes off scoring wise, I mean, That's another superstar there. Porzingis can go crazy. We saw, was it game one of the finals or was it a playoff game where he came in from injury?
Yeah, it was game one of the
had, like,
finals where
it was game
Porzingis
one,
came in and just
and he
like
just
is
didn't
knocking
miss.
down everything he shoots.
Yeah, and it's just teams have superstars. Most teams have a superstar, but when you've got 4 or 5 guys that can be superstars on any given night, it's hard to beat.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. But strange things happen in this league.
Yeah.
Which is why, like, let's be honest, they probably won't win. And I can't wrap my head around what the series of events will be to lead us there. But we haven't had a repeat champion since that dominant Warriors team that you just referenced. And I don't see why that necessarily will not keep going, but there's a lot of weird stuff going on in Boston.
Yeah.
They're up for sale. There's the whole Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown summer thing. Like you said, Kristaps Porzingis is not coming into the season healthy. Will he be able to get healthy? Who knows? Yeah. But yeah, I mean, you look at the Knicks. They've got pretty much an answer for everything the Knicks could give them. I guess the one thing that I don't think anyone has an answer for in the East is like a healthy Joel Embiid.
Yeah.
But like a healthy Joel Embiid's like Bigfoot. No one's ever seen it. So who knows if it's real in the playoffs?
It's the thing with Philly, and it's the thing like I love the big three of Embiid, Maxey, and George, but like you look at it, Embiid struggled to be healthy. Paul George just got injured yesterday. Yeah. I mean, I think it came out and said he's only going to be out for a week, or he'll be evaluated in a week or so. But it's like George and Embiid. It's like I don't remember the last time Embiid was healthy in a playoff series. Like,
it's hard to trust. It's definitely hard to trust. And we say that, and I'm pretty sure for a points per game standpoint, and I realize he only played one series. I think Embiid led the league in the playoffs in points per game. But it wasn't like he was shooting like 20% in the fourth quarter. It wasn't enough.
And we did a top 10 NBA players list, and we made an episode of it. And like I had Embiid as my number 3 because just the production that he has on the court, like despite him not being there come playoff time, the guy just averages like 35 points regular season playoffs. I thought he was going to be the runaway MVP this year before he got injured,
and he should have been.
Yeah,
absolutely,
it was
should have been.
It's just he's a superstar. And look, I mean, at the end of the day, if Philly can be healthy, I mean, some of the guys that they signed on their team is crazy.
Yeah, I mean, the depth that they were able to just like pull out of their asses is insane. Having a Caleb Martin, I mean, Kyle Lowry gave them great minutes in the playoffs last year. If you can put him on ice until the first round next year. Yeah, I don't know. The East, I just hope everybody's healthy. Like, I don't want to see another injured Milwaukee season. Like, let's see Giannis at his peak. Like, try to unseat the Celtics. Let's see Embiid at his peak. Try to unseat the Celtics. Like, that's where it really all gets super fun.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's the thing. Like, if Boston, for example, most likely, if everything goes to plan, they'll probably finish as the number 1 seed again in the East. But like, if they've got to go through like in a first round, like you play a Cleveland or an Indiana or something like that, then you play a Milwaukee, then you play a Philly or a New York or anything, like you just got to throw the best punches with them, and no, it'd be interesting. It'd be very good.
I mean, hey, Indiana, they couldn't stop Indiana. And Indiana wasn't fully healthy. They couldn't stop Indiana. Indiana couldn't stop them. But all those games were close, even though it was a 5-game series.
Yeah, I mean, it came to a Jaylen Brown 3-pointer to send him into overtime in game 1. So, I mean, anything can happen.
Anything can happen.
Well, Patrick, we'll wrap it up there. Thank you very much for coming on the podcast. I mean, I could talk basketball all day. I only planned for this to be like 20 minutes, and we're already at 33. So.
When you said that, I was like, no way.
Yeah,
Not
with
my big mouth.
But that's all good. Thank you very much for coming on. Appreciate you being here, and we'll be tuning into your podcast, obviously, as you guys keep doing what you're doing. But thank you very much for coming on.
Awesome. Yeah, anytime. Thanks so much, man.